Being buried alive is one of humanity's oldest fears. Long before horror movies existed, people were terrified of waking up underground with no way to escape. Just imagine it. You open your eyes and everything is dark. You can't move your arms properly. You can't sit up. You can't stand. Above you are thousands of pounds of soil. Nobody can hear you. Nobody knows you're there. It's the kind of nightmare that most people hope never happens. But have you ever wondered what would actually kill you first? Would you run out of oxygen? Would you die from dehydration? Would starvation get you? Or would something else kill you long before any of those things had a chance? Today we're going to follow the horrifying timeline of what happens to the human body after it's buried alive. And by the end, you'll understand why the answer isn't what most people think. The first thing that would try to kill you isn't a lack of air. It isn't hunger. It isn't thirst. It's your own mind. The moment you realize you're trapped underground, your body would likely enter full panic mode. Your heart would begin racing. Adrenaline would flood your bloodstream. Your breathing would become rapid and shallow. Think about the last time you were stuck in an elevator or trapped in a small room. Now imagine that feeling multiplied by 100. You know nobody can hear you. You know there's no obvious escape route. You know that every second matters. Most people imagine they would stay calm and carefully ration their air, but history suggests otherwise. Human beings are not designed to stay calm when they believe they're about to die. Many people would immediately start screaming for help. They would pound on the walls. They would thrash around trying to create space. Unfortunately, all of this would make the situation much worse. Every panicked breath burns through valuable oxygen while filling the enclosed space with something far more dangerous: carbon dioxide. And this is where things start becoming truly terrifying. Most people assume oxygen is the main problem. In reality, carbon dioxide is often the first serious threat. Every breath you exhale contains carbon dioxide. In a normal environment, it disappears into the atmosphere. But in a sealed coffin or confined underground space, it has nowhere to go. Minute by minute, the air around you begins to change. At first, you probably wouldn't notice anything unusual. The air would feel normal. You would still be able to breathe. You might even think you have hours to figure out a solution. But while you're focused on escaping, carbon dioxide levels are quietly rising around you. As the concentration increases, your body begins reacting. You may develop a headache. Your chest may start feeling tight. Breathing becomes more difficult. Some people describe it as the feeling of constantly needing a deeper breath, but never quite getting enough air. Then the symptoms become worse: dizziness, confusion, sweating. Your brain starts receiving signals that something is terribly wrong. The terrifying part is that panic now makes everything worse. The more frightened you become, the faster you breathe. The faster you breathe, the faster carbon dioxide accumulates. It's a vicious cycle that traps victims long before they run out of oxygen. But how long would this actually take? The answer depends on one very important detail. How much space are you trapped in? A standard coffin contains a surprisingly limited amount of air. Even if it were completely airtight, which many are not, the amount of breathable air isn't nearly as large as most people imagine. Under ideal circumstances, a calm person might survive for several hours, but a terrified person gasping and struggling could dramatically shorten that timeline. This is where many people get the answer wrong. They picture themselves slowly suffocating as oxygen disappears. In reality, the rising carbon dioxide is likely to become unbearable long before oxygen reaches zero. Your body is extremely sensitive to carbon dioxide. Even relatively small increases can trigger intense discomfort and a desperate urge to breathe. That's why victims often describe feelings of panic and air hunger even when oxygen is still present. As the hours pass, the symptoms continue worsening. Headaches become severe. Concentrating becomes difficult. Your thoughts start slowing down. Decision-making becomes impaired. You may begin feeling exhausted despite the adrenaline. Some victims would likely drift in and out of consciousness. Others might experience confusion so severe they no longer understand what's happening. This stage is particularly dangerous because the body is beginning to lose its ability to respond effectively. The same brain that was desperately searching for a way out is now struggling to function. And yet, many people watching this are probably still thinking the same thing. What about dehydration? Surely that would kill you first, right? Surprisingly, no. A healthy person can survive for days without water. The exact amount varies depending on temperature, physical condition, and activity levels, but dehydration is generally a slower killer than a sealed atmosphere. The same goes for starvation. Humans can survive for weeks without food under certain circumstances. That's why hunger is rarely the immediate concern in a buried alive scenario. The air becomes the enemy long before food or water ever have the chance. By the time dehydration becomes life-threatening, a victim trapped in a small sealed space would likely already be facing a much more immediate crisis. Perhaps that's why the fear of being buried alive has existed for centuries. It isn't just the thought of death, it's the thought of waiting for it, knowing exactly what's happening while being powerless to stop it, listening to your own breathing in the darkness, wondering whether anyone will find you in time, hoping somebody hears you, hoping somebody notices you're missing, hoping somebody starts digging before the air runs out. So what kills you first when you're buried alive? Most people would guess starvation. Others would say dehydration. Some would simply say suffocation. But the reality is more complicated and arguably far more frightening. In a confined underground space, the first true killer is usually the air itself. This is the point of no return. Contrary to what many people imagine, death often wouldn't come from dramatic choking or gasping. Instead, consciousness would fade as the atmosphere becomes increasingly hostile to human life. The victim slips into unconsciousness and eventually respiratory failure follows. In a completely sealed coffin, this is likely what would kill you first. Not starvation, not thirst, not even the simple absence of oxygen. It would be the buildup of carbon dioxide poisoning the air around you. But here's the truly disturbing part. A sealed coffin is actually one of the better scenarios. If the burial space isn't sealed, entirely different dangers begin appearing. Water can seep in through the soil. Heavy rain can flood underground spaces. Loose dirt can collapse inward and compress the chest, making breathing nearly impossible. Cold temperatures can lower body temperature to dangerous levels. Insects and animals may find their way into confined spaces. Tree roots can eventually break through wood. The underground environment is filled with hazards most people never think about because they're already dead before encountering them. And that's what makes being buried alive one of the most terrifying fates imaginable. The clock doesn't start when you run out of air. It starts with your very first breath. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.